Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start the event in about 5 minutes. We're expecting this to go about an hour long, so if you need to go to the restroom, there's a restroom next door you have to go through the shop, and there's also one behind this door. But once we hit 7 o'clock, we're going to start this really late. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin this now, and I would like to say if you guys need to use the restroom anytime during the presentation, please go outside into the storefront. You can use the restroom next door. We're going to have an intro right now with Rob. Thanks for coming.
Hello, all. Thank you for coming out. And I just wanted to give a quick introduction to Tony Rolando from Make Noise. Tony and I have known each other for a little over 20 years now. And one thing that's always been on my mind with the products that Make Noise has made since they started almost 10 years ago now was the aesthetic and the amount of thoughtfulness and context that is put into each of the modules. And it's something for me that's very special because for me as an artist, to be able to engage with an instrument that is in a very gestural way is very important. And I think that Tony has always been very thoughtful and very, very present-minded about those sorts of things. So much so, I have recently just opened an exhibition at the Museum of Arts and Design here in Manhattan, and I commissioned Tony to make a piece for the show. It's an interactive exhibition, so you're actually able to go in and touch the objects in the pieces inside of the exhibition. And so now Tony will be giving you a demonstration of the morphogene, which is, in a way, a reference to tape machines and tape music, musique concrète, which Pierre Schaeffer and Pierre Henry cultivated these techniques in the late 1940s, and the morphogene is a very special granular sampler. So I guess without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tony Rolando from Make Noise.
Hello, I would like to introduce the morphogene. Is there anybody here who hasn't ever heard of the morphogene? Oh, there are a couple people who haven't ever heard. What about the phonogene? You two who haven't heard of the morphogene. Have you heard of the phonogene? No, all right. Well, then I'll give a very, very brief, brief intro to why we made the phonogene and then the morphogene. So the idea was we were looking at early electronic music and all of it that was made with tape machines. There's so much of it that was made with tape machines before synthesizers were a commonly produced instrument. And there was never really anything that captured those techniques and processes in a format that could be used in modular synthesizers. And so we set out, I guess at this point, maybe 6, 7 years ago, I can't remember, but something like that, to make a module that would put some of these processes that these early artists used to create electronic music into the modular synthesizer system. And the main things that we were trying to incorporate were this idea of sort of capturing sound and chopping it up into pieces and reorganizing it. And then additionally, changing the speed and the direction. I mean, this may seem crude by today's standards, but at the time, these were very, very useful tools to these artists. So just capturing a sound of somebody playing one note on a violin and reversing it, or perhaps cutting off the start of the note so that it seems like there's no attack. It just sort of comes from nowhere. These sorts of techniques were very thrilling to those musicians at that time. And so we wanted to put some of those processes into a module, and I guess what would make it more exciting and relevant today is that they will be under voltage control. So you could be cutting up a piece of audio that you captured using a stream of gates from another module. Maybe you have a gate sequencer or a random gate generator. You could patch something like that into your phonogene and let it cut up the sound. and then you could take another control voltage and use that control voltage to select the order in which those sounds are played back. And so it sort of put these older processes into a new system that people were excited about, because people were, there was some people excited about modular synthesizers even 7 years ago. And so we did that for a while, and then technology improved, and there was all these great things happening that we wanted to take advantage of. And so we decided to make another microsound and music concrete inspired module, and that is the Morphogene. So I know that there's a couple people who don't know about either of those, but how many of you have read the Morphogene manual, for example? Okay, so maybe 50% of you have read the Morphogene manual. Is there anybody here who's curious what makes the Morphogene different from the phonogene? Yeah, we got a few hands for that. All right, sounds like I should talk about everything. So, yeah, all right. The other thing I wanted to talk about tonight, and I will get into it briefly, is some things that I've been doing with the Morphogene. Sometimes when you make these things, you're using them all day long. I mean, I go into work and it's sitting on my desk, and basically everything that anyone's asking me about has to do with it. So I'm always touching them and adjusting them and listening to them all day long, but I don't always get, surprisingly, some people are surprised by hearing this, I don't always get the chance to actually use them to create music. A lot of times I'm trying to recreate problems that other people have had using them so that I can study those problems and figure out how to solve them. So I've got a long list of things that I would like to do with the Morphogene, and I've started working my way down that list. And so I don't know that all these things are going to be successful or useful, but I do know a couple of them have worked for me, and I'll talk about those too later. I guess to start off, I do have something in here, but it's pretty wild. I don't know if it's the best way to start. So I'm going to actually get rid of that. And let's see here. To start with, I'm gonna put a reel in here that I use all the time during beta testing, just because it's really easy to hear what's happening. So it's not the most exciting reel. It's actually a reel of somebody counting. So, all right.
2, 3, 4.
All right, so that's how you load a reel, by the way. There's a button combo, and it puts you into a mode where you can load reels off of an SD card. That was a really big step for us, for me at least personally. I didn't really like the idea of having an SD card on one of our modules initially. There's just something about it that took me out of the moment. But then I also knew that a lot of people really wanted the ability to recall sounds that they had made elsewhere. And there was quite a bit of debate about it, and a lot of the beta testers that we worked with really pushed for it, and I could definitely see their reasoning. And now that we have it, I'm glad. It was a great struggle to implement it, but now that it's there, I'm happy that it's there. But it's pretty small, so it's kind of over in the corner. You can't see it too much. But it is great. It is kind of cool to be able to have more than one project that you're working with on a card and be able to recall them and sort of go back and forth. Maybe you're working on something and you're really excited about it, but then maybe you get a little bored of it, so you can break down your patch, go and work on something completely different. So this reel, what is really useful for...
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5, 8, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
it's really useful
7,
because
8.
Counting is so simple, and I mean, assuming you understand English, it's really easy to track what you're listening to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so we use this reel a lot to figure out how the Morphogene was working, if it was doing what we thought it was doing. And so one of the big things about the Morphogene was that it went from a really short period of time that we could record to a really long period of time. So for those who don't know about the phonogene really had about a 2-second buffer. That's not much time. But that was also what made it kind of fun. Because you had such a limited amount of time, all of the things that you wanted to do were pretty easy to keep under control. The human mind can really well keep track of 2 seconds worth of sound. You don't have to work too hard at it. But now this thing has 2 minutes and 54 seconds. That's quite a bit more sound to keep track of, and it's really easy to get lost within it. And so this reel of counting came in handy because it was, well, I mean, you could say, well, what happened to number 2? Number 2 disappeared. Maybe we were working on some routines where we were trying to figure out how to delete splices, for example. And sometimes we would delete a splice, but it might come back. That's easy to do. If you know you deleted splice number 2 and it says 2, and then you come back to it, well, it's gone, but then later on it came back. 2's back. What's going on here? So that's part of what this reel was useful for. It's also useful for showing you some of the things that the morphogene can do that are different than the phonogene. So with the phonogene, all of the manipulation was on a sample level. So for example, when you sped up the sound, it was just playing it back at a faster sample rate. So you could play back really slow, and then also with that you would get aliasing and whatnot because you were playing back below Nyquist, or you could play back really fast. But you were literally just playing if you recorded something that was supposed to be at 44.1, you could play it back a little faster or a lot slower. With the morphogene, everything is recorded at the same sample rate. It's all recorded at 48 kilohertz. And all of the speeding up and slowing down is done in DSP. And the advantage of that is that it lets us do all sorts of other things that we couldn't do with the phonogene. So for example, the gene size. On the phonogene, the gene size was directly related to samples again. So you could have 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on genes. And the genes would always be related to the rate of time that you were playing the sound back at. So if you sped up very speed on the phonogene, your gene size would shrink. If you slowed it down, your gene size would get larger. What's kind of nice about the morphogene is that the gene size it's actually a steady value. So if you set gene size, for example, here we'll set it to play one number.
1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3,
So now
3,
it's only
3,
playing
3.
3. If I speed it up or slow it down, that window is going to stay the same size, but you might hear more audio creep into that window, or less audio if I slow it down.
3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8, 4, 8,
And now, if I slow it down too much, you don't even hear all of the number 3 being said. So what's kind of fun about that is that I don't know if you can see it on here, but this LED that's flashing, at the end of every gene, it generates a gate. And what's great about this not being connected, the vary speed and the gene size, is that this gate is going to be steady. So no matter what speed you play, you'll see the end of splice always occurs at the same time. And the advantage of that is that when you're trying to interact with the rest of the system, you can have a steady timing source coming from the morphogene back into the system, and using that end of splice gene here to, for example, clock your tempi or a gate sequence or some other sort of sequencer, a random voltage generator. And you can modulate vary speed, but that timing will stay steady. Now you could modulate that timing as well by patching something in the gene size, but you don't have to. You have that choice now. Whereas with the phonogene, we didn't have that because, like I said, we're working at a sample level. That's probably one of the largest differences here. And the big reason why we did that is that because we could record now 2 minutes and 54 seconds of audio, in order to get down to that granular level, in order to get down to that level where we're playing back pieces of sound that are so small that we can repeat them multiple times to make it seem like they're stretching out and taking longer to happen, it would be really tough to do that with 2 minutes and 54 seconds of audio if we were working at a sample level. because we would have to cut it down so many times to get into that range of the sub-milliseconds that we needed in order to create those kind of effects. And so the gene size had to be broken away from that vari-speed parameter in order to make it operate well. Another big difference between the phonogene and morphogene is there's no level input here. There's no attenuator for the level. We made a leveling process. Initially, some people were a little bit thrown by that because it exists in an analog system. A lot of times people in an analog system, they want a knob for everything. By getting rid of that knob, we were able to put more functionality into the module that maybe couldn't be done elsewhere. We did make a button combo that auto levels, and that too has been helpful for some people because I think oftentimes when you're kind of sampling on the fly and whatnot, you get into these points where you're not sure if you're clipping until you've already recorded it, and then it's too late to go back and adjust the input level. So the auto leveling definitely can help with that too. And then another really amazing thing, I think, that comes from having more time. We already talked about how we had to adjust how vari-speed and gene size operated. With the phonogene, there was only 2 seconds. So you hit record, and if you didn't fill the full 2 seconds, we kind of just assumed you didn't have enough stuff for it. Maybe you did 1.5 seconds. It was set at 1.5 seconds until you cleared it and recorded something new. But with the morphogene, because we had so much time, we were able to start thinking about how could we get into doing some more compositional things with this module, iterative processes, for example. And so we created something that allows you to record into a new splice. So you can record an initial splice, and then you can record another splice after that one. And that too is a really great compositional tool to have at hand. I'll try and set up something real quick here that would be an example of that. So sometimes, I'm sure all of you have made a patch and thought, this is great, but I kind of want to do more with it. I know, especially if you have a smaller system, that happens to me a lot. And so having the ability to record into a new splice answers some of those, I guess it kind of gives me something else to work with as far as trying to do something compositionally with our system. So I'm just going to set up something pretty simple here. Just a very quick morphogene. I'm going to use the morphogene to capture a very quick sequence. So I'm going to patch a sine wave from the DPO. And then I'm going to patch that into the Optimix. And I'm going to patch a clock from the Tempi to the CV bus here. And I'm going to share that into the Rene. So the Rene sequencer starts running. Take the QCV into the volt per octave input. Very, very simple stuff here. All right. And then get my gate sequence from the Rene as well. I'm just going to select a bunch of notes kind of arbitrarily here. And I'm going to go into the morphogene and create a new reel. So I've got nothing in there. Go ahead and do my auto leveling. And I'm just going to do this manually. But you could perhaps, if you knew you wanted, for example, an 8-note sequence, well, why don't we just do it? I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. So I programmed a divide by 8 on channel 3 of the Tempi, and for my first splice on the reel, I can just patch into the record here. And so I'll wait and see here. So it's recording, Now it's off. Whoa. All right. So I've captured that that little passage, right? And I mean, obviously, if you're getting into this, you are going to do something maybe a little more elaborate. But the idea here is to kind of show you, once you get that captured, you might want to do a variation on that. For example, we could do some gate programming. Over here. And we could set up for something to layer on that. And capture another version of this same sequence. Or I guess we've changed it now, but and then we could also record it into a new splice. With some modulation. So for example, we could say we were at a point where we're pretty happy with it, we could actually capture that into another splice and then retain that original splice as well. Hold record. And then the trick is we have to put it back to the sort of default settings in order to hear the recording without any modulations. So there's that. And then there's the original one. And then we could continue to process that. And we could do, for example, maybe some really slow modulation of it. I'll use a really slow cycle from maths to I'm also going to slow down the whole playback to very speed. And I can record this into a new splice. I could manually play some of the knobs as well. Again, if you want to hear exactly what you just recorded, you have to put the controls back to the sort of default positions. So there's the modulations that we just performed, recorded into another splice. And, I mean, you can keep doing these iterative processes until you run out of space, and you'd be surprised it takes quite a while to run out of space when you have 2 minutes and 54 seconds to work with. So if we go back, we can kind of hear that original. And then our second iteration. And then the third. So having that ability to record into new splices was huge for me. I mean, it just meant that suddenly this module became a sort of compositional tool for me, and I started having all sorts of ideas about things that could make music exciting for me again. I think part of growing up playing in bands and stuff is I always felt like I needed that external stimulation from other musicians in order to create. I never could be that person that was, you know, I guess like playing music god, you know, like in the throne, like controlling all the MIDI devices to do exactly their bidding. I've always kind of liked to have the unexpected or to collaborate with something, be it human or machine. And so this really opened that up for me. And I started to make I made a few pieces of music using the Morphogene, using some of these techniques that we've discussed, these iterative processes where you're recording one splice into the next splice, into the next splice. The other thing that I experimented with a bit was something I called long format genetic exploration. And so yeah, that's a pretty fun name for something that's, it can have some good results. Actually, I wanted to play a little excerpt from a piece that I did. I can't remember where they put that. So we were asked to do a presentation on the Morphogene at the Black Mountain College Museum in Asheville. And myself and some other members of the Make Noise crew made patches to perform at the event as well. And so this is an excerpt from that, from the patch that I did for that event. I'm not going to tell you the source material. I'll let you check it out first, and then we can talk about the source material a little bit. But this piece used that long format genetic exploration to create much of what you're hearing. There is some other patching going on in this piece. The whole piece was created on this system right here. It's recorded live to stereo 2-track. So that piece was, this is a very simplified version of the patch, actually. That was obviously a Kraftwerk piece, and I recorded that off a record and processed it through some amplitude modulation and some herb verb into the morphogene, and then for the piece that I played you prior to that, there was further processing through Echophone and herb verb and Optimix with a bunch of amplitude modulation, and then some more patching that happened there. And that kind of led me to start thinking about, it was just fun for me because it was a piece of music that I'd always loved. But I didn't really, I guess it kind of had a nostalgic value to me. I kind of wanted to make some music with this music that I really loved. And so it was very pleasing to me to be able to sort of get down in there and explore some of the sounds between the sounds and play them back out of order so that it was not really recognizable. I mean, I don't know if any of you, did anyone here recognize that before you heard just the loop? Oh, wow. Really? Okay. Yeah?
The loop, the originating loop.
Oh, I meant the piece I was playing here. From here, not from here.
Yeah, there was you can hear the pad.
Oh, really? That's cool. Okay. No one, the night that I played it, no one could recognize it, but I guess I've got some smarter folks in here. Well, anyhow, I'll play another piece I did, kind of using using more of that kind of long format stuff, and maybe you'll recognize this right away too. I don't know. Maybe I need to work on my format a little bit. So this is another piece that I did where I took a piece of music that meant quite a bit to me at a certain time in my life, and then I kind of wanted to see what else I could find inside it to create some music right now. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. Oh, yeah, sorry. There we go. So that piece was created with, like I said, a piece of music that meant a lot to me quite a while ago. You might recognize it. Yes, no? It's Van Halen's 1984. So, like, for me, this was huge when it came out in 1984 because it was some of the first like synthesizer forward music that myself or any of my friends had ever heard. It was on a rock record, so we were kind of forced to listen to it. We didn't want to hear it. We just, you know, we bought Van Halen's record, we put it on, and it was like, what the fuck is this? But then, you know, it's like I kept finding myself going back, and you know, you had to play it before you heard Jump, and but it wasn't a bad thing. And I think it kind of, it impacted me deeply. So to kind of grab that piece of music and sort of travel through it and try to find other sounds inside of it, I had a lot of fun making that piece. Again, you know, I don't make, you know, I'm not trying to make music to win the world over or anything. It's more something that I do for enjoyment. But that was very enjoyable for me. And I don't think that I could have done that myself. I couldn't have done that without the Morphogene. I know that there's many people that can do it using computers and whatnot, and that's your process, and your, you know, that's your process. But for me, I had never been able to do anything like that before. To be able to capture that much audio and then really slowly traverse through it and go forward, backwards, jump around, and layer it on top of itself, for me, that was huge. And then, you know, taking it off the record, I of course got some really great surface noise and stuff that manifested in some like clicks and pops that I was sort of mining for rhythmic effect. I really enjoyed making the piece. And I guess maybe there was someone here who guessed it was from that. I'm not sure. You did. This guy is amazing.
That was my first concert.
Really? That is so, wow. That's a great first concert. That's cool. For that, you get a t-shirt.
I thought I was, but when I heard it, I thought, no, it can't be. I was too embarrassed to raise my hand.
Hey, you know, I mean, it's your first concert, so there's nothing to be embarrassed about remembering music from your first concert, that's for sure. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm doing with the Morphogene. I guess this is, you know, I'm trying to keep this under an hour. There's about 15 minutes left. I know there's at least one person here that has a question, and I would love to get some questions from you all. What do you all want to know about the Morphogene? Questions, anyone? Thoughts? Comments?
How long did it take to develop it?
It took almost 2 years. We thought we had it many times, and then we just we kept stumbling actually on the fact that you could store sounds to an SD card, and you could store so much sound and have so many splices. Those were the kind of things we were struggling with. The sheer volume of audio or just data that you could manipulate with this thing.
What does DSL stand for?
DSL?
Yeah.
Oh,
Is that what you said was the processor?
Oh, DSP.
Oh, DSP.
Yeah. Digital signal processing.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, that's just kind of a catch-all term for anytime you're capturing some sort of signal and doing something to it and then spinning it back out on the other side.
Yeah. Do you have any samples of like acoustic instruments?
I do actually have, okay, so I'm glad you asked that. So one thing that we've been doing lately is trying to get people to share their reels that they make on the Morphogene. So since we put this SD card into this thing, we thought, why not allow people to share reels and maybe collaborate in some way. You know, maybe you make a piece with a bunch of sounds and then send it to someone else, and they could make a piece with those same sounds, but it will probably sound very different. And so we started a reel sharing project at freesound.org, If you just search MG Reel or Morphogene, you'll see the page will pop right up. And one of the reels that I have on here is it's an acoustic piano that was prepared to some degree. I think it was prepared mostly by time. This was in the basement of Mylar Melodies. I don't know if any of you have heard of Mylar Melodies. He makes a lot of cool videos about modular synthesizers. So we had him do a video about the Morphogene, and one of the things he did was he took it to his, I believe it was his parents' house, and they had an old upright piano in the basement, and he created a whole bunch of really great sounds with that. And if you have time, he made a video that's kind of separate from the main video that he did for us that's just those sounds. And it's really fantastic. And so we asked him to put those into a reel for us.
My Dutch angles.
This is it.
My Dutch angles.
So it starts with him saying that in his charming voice. All right, so we can get that loaded up. And this isn't spliced up a lot. We did put some splices in it for him. He sent it to us as a raw audio file, and Walker put some splices into it, but it could be definitely spliced up more. Let's see. So you can kind of hear. First, I'll give you an idea of. And these were recorded just with a couple of, I think he had like a Zoom recorder or something like that. So we could take this, let's see what this short progression there. And we could, first of all, we could turn gene size up. And you know, you don't really hear much. Well, that's because you're at the very beginning of the splice. So if we use slide, we can read, we can kind of explore through the sound. So there's like a transient, maybe right where you hit one of the chords. Also, we can change the pitch, obviously. The direction, we can turn vary speed through 12 o'clock. So it's going in reverse. But when you cut sound really, really small like that, you'll notice sometimes forward and reverse kind of sound the same, actually. We can also start to modulate slides, so we move around through a range by setting the attenuator so that I'm not going the full range of the sound. I can slide just. I'm just kind of traveling around just one little portion of the sound. With morph, I can start to layer those genes on top of each other, and you're going to hear less of the spaces between the sound then. if we didn't want to do it with a control voltage, we could also use a clock source. Patch into the clock in here. And we could time stretch in that way as well. You can get that reel at the freesound.org. There's a whole bunch of great stuff on it.
Is there a reason why the pattern sounds like it's like a pentatonic scale or something?
A reason why what now?
It sounds like a pentatonic scale. Is
Oh, yeah.
that something you're controlling? Or?
Oh, no, I think he played that in.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the whole loop was, there we go. Anyone else have any questions? Yeah?
I've seen a number of live performances this year that make use of modular synths in both a huge forum setting and a small club setting. And I noticed that the sound is so clean, like it's so crisp and clear. And that has motivated me to get kind of interested in these kinds of instruments. So I'm wondering, what is your advice for someone who's just about ready to get into this?
Oh. Well, I think... Yeah, well, I would say you should, have you looked at the small desktop, that we make, the Zero Coast?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, my partner.
That's a cool place to start because it's affordable, but it still has a lot of the concepts that you find in our shared system, this system here. So, for example, it still has a two-stage function generator, for example, like one channel of maths here. Has a random voltage generator like what you would find in the Wogglebug. It has an analog VCO with some timbral shaping like what you'd find in this half of the DPO. It doesn't have Vactrols in it, but it has a form of a low-pass gate like what you'd have here in the Optimix. And my thinking was things like voltage control, pitch shifting, echo, reverb are kind of expensive to do. And I figured a lot of people have stomp boxes and stuff already in their collection. And so it has a line level output. And the idea was that perhaps the things that you wouldn't commonly find in a musician's collection of instruments, a function generator, an analog VCOs, low pass gates, things like that, we provide you in this small little instrument. And then the digital signal processing and stuff you could do with stomp boxes that you already had, at least to get started. I mean, obviously, eventually it'd be cool if you kept with it and moved into a full system, but just for getting started, that's a great place to go.
What was the name of that again?
The Zero Coast? Yeah, they have one here probably, right, Darren?
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you should check that out. It's a good place to start. It also has MIDI in, so a lot of folks that I don't use MIDI much, but a lot of other musicians use MIDI all the time, and so we stuck that on there too, just to make it easier to work into their current system of their current way of operating and creating music.
I have a question. You probably have been asked that before.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be ever? Is there ever a remote possibility to be able to turn off the quantization for the varispeed on the morphogene?
Oh, yeah. Well, we did. Did you get the firmware update?
Yes.
Okay.
Course, yes.
Yeah, we haven't.
It's really better now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an awesome update.
Yeah.
The time doubled the real time,
Mm-hmm.
and there is less noticeable
Yeah.
quantization, but it's still there.
Yeah. No, there is still some. Yeah. Tom and I have talked about that, and we have. We're going to experiment with it a little bit. There is, there is some things about it that can make it a little bit, I guess, harder to use. It can make it harder to use in certain instances. So for example, if you were trying to sequence varispeed with a sequencer like Rene, not having that quantization there can make some values
Can it be optional
jump.
for a button combo?
We will think about it. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't want to say anything because obviously I don't want to create work for Tom unless he's ready to do it. But we're definitely thinking about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, I see another. How about you in the blue and striped shirt?
Okay.
The blue and white stripe.
Like for you personally, what is your like favorite kind of sound to sort of mangle using the morphogene, like a pad or like drums or something like that? Like, what's your favorite kind of sound to mess around with?
Well, like I say, right now I've been kind of mining my record collection and thinking about music that meant a lot to me, and so that's why I made that whole piece using the Van Halen's 1984. I mean, it's nothing to be proud of. No one runs down the street saying, "Hey, I'm a fan of Van Halen." But I don't know. The music meant something to me at one time, and so it was enjoyable to work with that as a audio source material. If it conjures memories and feelings and stuff, I don't want to give people the experience of listening to 1984. I want to try to convey to them some experience that I had that's related to that piece of music. And so that's why I was working with it. And the same with the Kraftwerk piece as well, which obviously wasn't as well concealed. But I'm working on it. I'm not, I'm obviously not saying that none of you came here tonight to hear my music, came here to hear me talk about the morphogene. So I'm not saying that I'm doing the best job at it, but I'm working at it. And so I'm actually going through some other music, some of which is even perhaps more embarrassing than Van Halen's 1984, and that I hope to be able to conceal even more so that even this guy here cannot guess it. But yeah, so that's what I've been doing a lot. But we, in our real sharing project, I've noticed that people really enjoy doing field recordings into the morphogene, and recording anything from like a dripping faucet to going down to the rail yard and recording trains, coupling or decoupling. These kinds of things can sound really cool in the morphogene. Right there, boom.
Always carry this.
Yeah, right, right. I mean, there's so many great, I mean, the Zoom hand recorders are amazing for that kind of thing. I mean, they sound fantastic, and then you just pull that audio off and you can put it right into the morphogene. So, I mean, you do have to convert it to 32-bit, which I know that you had that question, why 32-bit? And the reason is that the internal processing on the morphogene is 32-bit. So by having you make your files 32-bit on the way in, it conserves some processing power for us that we can use to do other stuff, if that makes sense. So if you put a 24 or 16-bit in, the first thing that this little feller would have to do is convert it to 32 so it could start working with it. And that's using it's sort of like if you had like something heavy that you needed to get up the stairs and put into your apartment, like a big couch, if someone like actually brought it up right up to your door, and then you only had to move it from like outside your door into your house instead of carrying it up all those stairs, it's easier for you. So that's the reason for that.
The only thing is because most of the older recorders I have go up to 24-bit and that's it.
Right, and so we're compiling a list of softwares that export to 32-bit float. But it's pretty common. I mean, well, I shouldn't say pretty common, but it's out there.
It is.
Yeah, yeah. Is there any other questions or comments? Oh yeah, right. What's going on over there?
I was just curious. You had before the morphogene, you guys had been developing the control cell series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The 10B, and then you ended up releasing the morphogene. They have very specific directions in terms of their functionality within the system. I was wondering if you don't mind sharing with us where your brain is headed these days.
Yeah,
what
sure.
direction of modulation or voicing.
Yeah, the control cell thing was interesting because there's always been this idea in modular synthesis that if we could just store all the things that makes the patch sound so good, and then at a button bring it all back, and it's a lot harder to do than people. Well, I think people do realize it's hard, actually. I think they just want it still. And then there's also some philosophical things that you run into as well. And I find if synths have presets on them, people tend to play the presets. So if we made a system that had presets on it, that would be where a lot of people started, which isn't the worst thing. I mean, there's obviously a lot of music that a lot of people in this room love that was made with presets. But looking into the future, I think one of the greatest things about the sort of, I don't know, I'll call it a revolution, the Eurorack revolution, is that it kind of forced a bunch of musicians to learn how synthesizers work. And now I go to a room of people and talk about granular synthesis, and a lot of people in the room know what granular synthesis was. I don't think that would be the case 20 years ago. And so that's a really great thing. So presets, well, it is sort of forward thinking, and this idea of storing sounds, if you will, is definitely a technological feat. I don't know that it's necessarily the best thing for the people making music with the machines, because sometimes they, I feel like if somebody really knows a machine, they can just create great music with it, whether they have it stored in there or not. And so I think that combined with just generally people who were beta testing the Control Cell series were, they were battling, you know? You had like, everybody wanted more, but not more of the same things. And it was kind of a hard project to work on actually because of that. So you had one person saying we need this and this and this, and another person saying that you need these 4 other things, and only 2 of those things were shared between those 2 people. Take that times 10 or 12, and suddenly you've got 40-something things that you need to add to a device, but it can't be bigger than it is already because they don't want it to be any bigger. And it was kind of a challenge that seemed to be heading in a direction of very little actual satisfaction and inspiration to the people who were actually going to have and use the device. So it was tough to 86 it because we'd already put all this time and money into it, but at the same time I kind of felt like if we unleash this thing into the world, people might eventually hate us. So I didn't want to take that I didn't feel like it was a risk worth taking at the time. I mean, we're still thinking about those ideas, and we did put some of that work into the Tempe. But what's interesting is I've noticed that in my personal use of the Tempe, I mostly just hammer on these buttons and create what I need in the moment. Yeah, and this guy, you're shaking your head saying, yeah, that's I mean, I feel like a lot of people are doing that. Now, 10 years ago, if you told me that there was a 6-channel synchronizable tap tempo device, and that's all it did, I would have been thrilled. Yeah, I didn't even need the state storage. The whole state storage thing was something that was like, whoa, hey, we could do this. Let's give it a shot. So I'm still kind of waiting to see if people use it more and more. Now, James Sigler did a video recently, or it was a video of a piece he did, I think for one of the Binary Society. They do these electronic music shows out in the Bay Area. And James Sigler, if any of you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, you should. He makes a lot of really great videos. And he did a piece where he did use states, and it was really great, actually. And that was kind of satisfying to see, okay, wow, someone actually is using these stored states on the Tempe and doing something great with it. So I think maybe if I start seeing more of that, I'll be more motivated to develop some other modules that store state. But right now, what I'm seeing is people, they don't really care about the states. They're just using the real-time controls, and that's fine. I mean, that's great. That's why the real-time stuff is there. Yeah, I don't know if that totally answers your question. I guess the direction we're heading, I mean, I don't know. It's just so much. There's so much out there right now. I'm kind of letting things settle, see what people do with things that we're putting out there. Like the Morphogene is a great example of a module where I feel like we could kind of sit back and see what people do with it for a little while. Like, are they into having all this extra time to record into? Are they into being able to share sounds with the SD card and all this stuff? Is that something people are going to make music that they're excited about with? I mean, are they going to get in that? Are they going to get to that point where they feel like they've done something they've never done before? That's what we're kind of watching out for, keeping our ears and eyes out for that kind of thing. The Zero Coast actually kind of blows my mind because I see still every day people posting little clips on Instagram of some strange patch they discovered, and I'm thinking, wow, that's weird. Why would they patch that to there? And then I listened to it, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I mean, this is over a year this thing's been out, and I kind of thought people were moving past it, but I mean, there's still a ton of people who are just getting it and discovering things that I never even thought of. And that thing is I mean, I mean, all of that stuff we've already had for years, but we just never had it in that kind of format where it was easy for people to get their hands on it. And so that's been really cool to watch. It kind of makes me feel like maybe analog, real-time analog control hasn't really been exhausted yet. Yeah?
Hi. Yeah, this is more like a design and like visualization question.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to you talk about the different modules, it almost sounds like, and I could be projecting this, it almost sounds like you're identifying these modules as having personalities, like almost like an anthropomorphic identification. Like
I've never thought about that.
When you're doing this like design process, do you find yourself, or this iterative process, do you find yourself like organizing like goals with it? Maybe having like, oh, I want to like realize this personality of this module or anything like that?
Yeah, I've never thought about it in terms of the word personality, but I mean, definitely, yeah, definitely there are characteristics and goals that I try to achieve. Yeah, I mean, like the Morphogene's a good example because there's a lot of color on it. We knew that it would be a black panel, so there was part of me that really wanted to see these pinks and purples and all these other colors sort of creeping through there, and so that was definitely a goal. And I guess, yeah, maybe personality because Rob quite a while ago he came to our shop and gave a talk, and he had said something about this idea of how modules converse with each other. How when you're patching them, you're sort of opening the lines of communication from one module to the other. And so I guess that could kind of tie in with this idea of a personality. Like certain modules might be more aggressive than others, or they might have less to say to others. For example, like the herb verb or the morphogene, the CV out, there's really only one CV out on the herb verb, for example. So it perhaps has less that it can communicate to the other modules, whereas a module like maths is very talkative because, I mean, all of these jacks at the bottom here are all capable of telling other modules things to do. Go this way, go that way, stop, start, all this stuff can come from that one module. So yeah, I like that idea. I haven't really ever thought of it before, but that's I could see that coming into play for sure. Yeah, what's going on over there?
Yeah. What I really love to do with the morphogene usually is, the ability to avoid having to use the computer by just recording your entire session, your entire composition, and then send it back into the morphogene. And then you could use your entire modules all over again from scratch without having to.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
And, everyone hates to use it.
That's exactly what I'm talking about when I was talking about like the iterative processes. That's it.
But there's one catch.
Yeah.
There's one catch.
Yeah, yeah.
If there was a button, a button combination to just bring back the default.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
That would make it way easier. I mean, it's
sure,
yeah. Way better than the computer. Computer, but still, I mean, if there would be like, I don't know, like pressing the three buttons.
Yeah, yeah.
The pots will be, like it will bring back the original file.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally hear you. I mean, you probably noticed when I was showing. Well, all of you might have noticed is when I was showing you, when I was doing some of the iterative stuff, how I said, in order to hear what you recorded, you've got to put it back to your Unity settings or your one, like morph at 1:1, your varispeed at 1. Otherwise, you're going to hear further modulations or changes to the sound. So I hear what you're saying. The one thing that could come into play there, though, is now you're dealing with this idea of these are not what they seem. So even though this is here, it's actually set at 1, which could be a problem. But I'll think about how we could do something like that. I could. Is this turned down?
Yeah.
Oh no! Can you turn it down? I was going to unplug it. I could take a note and chat with Tom about that and see what we could do.
If you're in the studio, it's all good because you can take your time to adjust it. But if you, for example,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, in a live performance. Okay, all right. Hang on 1 second here. Yeah, I mean, I totally hear you, and I've been there. I've done some iterative stuff, and then when I switch it back to hear what I just recorded, I'm like, whoa, that sounds crazy, and it's because I'm doing all the modulations again on the thing I just modulated, and then realize it. Oh, okay, put them back. So it's like one of those, one of the things about something being, even though it is a digital signal processor, it's a very analog control structure to this digital process, and that's one of the things that happens when you have analog control over a digital process, is that where the knobs are pointing is where they're pointing. And if you have, if you have a modulator plugged into slide, for example, when I was playing something back for you all, I forgot that I had a random voltage patched in a slide. I mean, it's still going to be modulating. It's analog. That's what it knows. It knows to respond immediately to whatever's coming into this jack. So it's kind of it's like an advantage and disadvantage. In your case, what you're saying would be a disadvantage, but the advantage would be that it does respond very quickly to voltages that you patch in there. Maybe, but I will write that down, though.
Maybe like a bypass instead of.
Sure. Yeah.
You can just patch it through, for example, VCA matrix and turn the CD off. And you will have
Oh, sure, yeah, or just rip a plug out. I mean, well, it's funny because for so long I would be making patches, and I would always try to automate everything. I'd always try to set up everything so that when I hit this pad on pressure points, this VCA goes down, this one goes up, and all these things, and that's great. That's definitely fun. It's sort of like you're building little Rube Goldberg machines that they are all responding to each other and everything. And then I saw some people perform like Alessandro Cortini, and I noticed how much that he does manually. And it really kind of makes sense. If you've got all these knobs and buttons and stuff, sometimes the fastest way to make something happen is to just do it manually. And so I noticed things like him, pulling patch cables out, or like just playing some part of the phonogene manually by hand or something like that. So that kind of made me start to rethink how I patched. Is it really worth all of this effort and all these different channels of different modules to make this one thing happen when I could literally just say, modulation's out? Sometimes I'll pick, I always have one colored cable that's maybe different than all the others, and sometimes I'll mark that particular part of the patch with that other colored cable. Like, oh, the blue cable's the one that you yank out when you need the thing to stop. It's kind of crazy that when you're performing something, a lot of times things that seem really easy when you rehearse them at home are really hard, and, at least for me. And so having that blue cable is one you yank at 2 minutes. Having those kind of things in my mind really helps me to achieve something like what you're talking about, where I might do something and then think, oh, why is this still sounding so crazy? Oh, blue cable, pull it out, done. But I will definitely talk to Tom about that, for sure. Oh, what about you?
One other little question about the morphogene.
Mm-hmm.
If one were to hypothetically buy it as a gateway into Eurorack, because it is one of the best modules ever, do you think it works better, or not better, but do you think it would work just as well if it were standalone as opposed to getting it with a bunch of modulation sources, or
I think you could have a little bit of fun with it standalone, but I do think, I think at minimum you might benefit a lot from some random voltages and some sort of more predictable linear voltages.
It plays well with others?
Yeah, it would just be, there's things, even though I just told all of you about how I think sometimes it's great to do things manually, there's also things that some of these circuits could do that you could never really emulate manually. There's things like the way they move and how smooth and linear they can move sometimes, you could just never do that manually. It's kind of hard to explain, but you can hear it. So yeah, I think having a function generator like maths would be, even if you just had that, I think that would open up some pretty great some pretty great opportunities. So, for example, just doing things like using the clock out to do time stretching, that would be something you could do with those two. Or doing the time stretching in a more analog way using control voltages to just slide. Modulating gene size to go from large genes to small genes and back again, things like that. You could still play other parameters by hand, but having that other module there as almost like an invisible hand that's doing things that better than you could probably do them in some cases, or at least doing them and allowing you to have your other two hands free can be pretty useful. So, yeah?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around time lag accumulation.
Oh, yeah.
Is it sort of like a delay with only one repeat? I guess it's like a tape loop that records over what it repeats once and then records over.
Yeah, exactly. Based on where your sound-on-sound level is set, it could either combine with what's already been recorded, or it can record over it completely. Have you ever seen the Echoplex tape echo? The Echoplex was kind of neat because it was a physical tape echo with tape playback heads and stuff. And there's this one I'll call it a mode, although I'm sure they didn't call it a mode back in the 60s. You could turn off the erase head basically, and so it would just leave what was already on there, and then just keep printing stuff on the tape on top of it, so you could do a sort of kind of time lag accumulation. I think some people might disagree with that, but it was in that vein. But the idea is that you could sort of layer things, but on the fly, so you don't have to be, you don't have to really think about it so much. It's just already happening. It's always recording in and always playing back. And then based on this setting here, I don't know how well you can see that, but if you had it set all the way clockwise, you'd just be recording over at 100%. You wouldn't hear what was there before. You put it at 50%, you're going to hear some of what was there before and some of what's coming in now. And then, full counterclockwise, it's only going to be what's coming in. Actually, that first thing I told you, that should be flipped around. So this will be what is already there. This will be a blend of them, and then this will be what's coming in only. But it's always recording. It never stops. So if you have nothing coming in and you have it turned like this, eventually you'll have silence. Then if you start recording, you start playing something into it again, you're going to get sound, and then you could set it here and start layering that sound. Yeah?
Sorry, actually on that point, do you know how, I guess you would, how does it degrade? Like, because with a tape, right? Like I had
Right.
a RE301, it degrades because it's like slowly taking up everything, and the next layer like becomes loudest and works its way, pushes the headroom of the previous layer down, et cetera. So is this working in that way where it's the volume of the previous through of the slice, changes of the last?
Yeah, to a degree.
Okay.
So say you record it here. So I'm full counterclockwise. So I'm 100% signal input. Yeah. And then I set it to here. When it plays back into itself, it's at 50%.
Cool.
If I leave it here, when it plays back that third time, it's at 50% and 50%. So it's at 25%, right? And then
so is it
continues.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is where the noise floor, or how low of noise floor do you get with the digital material going over and over again? It goes by 50%, then
it can definitely
repeats a couple times. It seems like.
I mean, it has a has a lower noise floor than a tape echo would.
Yeah.
But a noise floor definitely comes into play, especially if there's noise from your source.
Sorry, not necessarily the noise floor. At which point is it so low in level that you can't hear it?
Like how many repeats does it take?
Yeah,
I would say
there might be a set amount of repeats just due to the nature of how it works.
it probably depends a lot on the source material. Like if the source material is really high harmonic, it's probably going to take longer for it to completely become inaudible, whereas if it's lower frequency. The other thing that plays a big role in it is your playback speed. So if you have it set lower or faster, that will also affect that.
Yeah, because if it's going faster, right, it's like a small size. It would just
Exactly.
go quicker, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's nice. Like I had the 301, and I really appreciate being able to
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah.
makes the composition process a little bit easier, where I'm not relegated to cutting tape physically, like
Oh,
putting
yeah.
it on the reel piece by piece.
Yeah, yeah. Cutting tape physically is a lot of work.
I mean, it's fun, but not all the time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's the easiest way to use TLA, to be honest with you, is if you have it set for the. So this is green, so it's at 1. That's going to be, and then this at 50%. The sound on sound at 50%. It's kind of a way for a sort of foolproof operation if you're just trying to get something going. And then you could cut a splice that was maybe in time with something else in your patch. So patch a clock divider into your record and capture whatever, say 8, 12, 16 clock pulses worth of time, and then remove that, and then get your TLA going, and now it's going to be cycling in time with the rest of your patch. You've got it at 50%. As long as you always have something coming into the input, you're always going to have something coming out. And then you're also, you're not doing any sort of playback speed modulation either. And so you're not going to end up losing source material either. That's the sort of foolproof way to use it. Once you start modulating vary speed, or you start doing things where you're changing the sound on sound level, you can definitely get yourself into cases where you have no sound. Yeah. In the back there?
Yeah. Were there any features that you had implemented during production you decided to omit for the final release?
In the Morphogene?
Yeah.
Features we had to get rid of?
Production, like things you decided to take out.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot. I mean, I think that's one of the, it's one of the hardest things to do, but it's also one of the things, it's not just hard, it also matters a lot. I think it's really easy to put everything in, but then it wouldn't be 20 HP. It would have to cost more and have to be bigger. And in my experience, talking to people over the years who are putting together modular synthesizers, they don't want things to be bigger or cost more because they've already got, you know, they only have 10 HP left in their current case or whatever. So being able to put the maximum amount of functionality into, you know, for me, 20 HP kind of became the size that I worked with Tom. Whenever I did something with Tom, Echophone, Herb, Morphogene, 20 HP seemed to make sense. And so that's why this is 20 HP as well as these other two. And so yeah, I mean, there was all sorts of wacky ideas. Some may be good, many not good, and that's why you don't see them here today. Yeah, there's notebooks of silly things that it was supposed to do, but it either we made it do them. That's the other thing. Sometimes it's you know, when you think about something like a VCO, there was before Make Noise even existed, there was hundreds of VCOs. And so we could look and see what other VCOs did and say, oh, VCOs generally do this, and when they do this, it's great. When they do this, it's not so good. And we kind of look at the past to develop the future. But with something like the Morphogene or the Herb Verb, it was a little tougher. It's sort of like saying, we know we want to do this digital process. And in a computer, adding more functionality is just a matter of adding it. It's virtual space. I mean, some people will get frustrated by a plugin user interface being having too many controls, being convoluted or hard to use. But at the end of the day, it's not going to cost them any more to run a plugin that's twice the size of another one. I guess maybe in CPU cycles it would. But you know, that's becoming less of an issue today. But my point is just that people generally, you know, when you look at something like a VCO or a VCA, you have stuff that you can look at, and you know stuff that works already. But with something like the Morphogene or the Herb Verb, there was a lot of things that we thought would be amazing. And then we implemented them and realized this actually isn't that interesting. It's not really doing a lot. There's not a dramatic effect to driving these parameters with the types of control signals that we would have available in a modular synthesizer. And so some of those things get rolled into other parameters. So a parameter might do more than what it says on the knob for that reason. Like maybe there was one really great behavior that happens when you saturate some control signal level, it did this thing. We might roll that into
some area on a parameter range just to give it a little sweetness. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, there is literally, there's stacks of things that didn't make it into the morphogene. And the herb verb, and maybe less so the echophone. The echophone, we definitely had stuff to look at. There's a lot of great pitch shifting echoes out in the world that we could look back on and say, hey, this is what makes an echo sound really great. Pitch shifting with echo is really great when you do this. There's examples, but voltage controlled reverb, there wasn't a lot to look at. So. Same thing with the herb verb. There's stuff that we put into it and then thought, wow, we need to figure out something else to do with this knob. This didn't turn out so great. Any other questions?
I recently, like you asked about starting with the morphogene, I recently started modular like a month or two ago, and morphogene was one of the first things I got.
Wow, that's bold.
and I recently bought a woggle bug to kind of drive that a little differently. Do you have any tips or suggestions on linking those two together?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any other modules?
Yeah, I have. I got maths. And,
okay. Yeah, so one thing that, let me see what I've got. I can't remember what I have in here. Am I up? Yeah? Oh, wait, I think I started a new reel. Yeah. I go back to...
Dutch angles.
I got some samples of motorcycles that I'm going to play. All right. So one thing I've looked at is there's a book that Curtis Rhodes wrote called Microsound. And so one thing that he talks a lot about in that book is randomization of parameters, of processes in granularization. And so I think the key to that, for me personally, when I'm working with the morphogene, is rather than, like, let's say if this is the total range that you could go in a modulation of slide, for example. Let me see if I can get something going on with that. This actually wouldn't be the best one for that. I want to find Alex. Here we go. So one thing that I would do is I would think about sort of having like a center point, and then modulating around that center point and adding something that a lot of granular software is called jitter. So jitter is essentially randomization. It's essentially the woggle bug. So one really fast and easy way to do that is to take something like maths and have a voltage that's steady from a sequencer or something like pressure points, where you can go to certain spots in the sound that you like. So we'll start that. Turn that off, turn this on.
So you're picking static points with pressure points on the slide?
Exactly, exactly. Can this be a little louder? Kind of a quiet sample. There we go. There we go, yeah. So I turn gene size up to something that's the size that I want, and that's really to taste. Some people, depending on the piece that you're making, you might want it really, really small so that it's completely undiscernible, or you might want it to where you can maybe hear a little bit of the source. And then you could select those with the pressure points. And then you could take that random voltage and you could pass that also into here and then add some of that in. And now I'm using the smooth, but it really kind of depends if you want something that's, well, it depends on how fast you're running it. I'm running it pretty fast right now too. Because when I think jitter in a traditional granular sense, I'm thinking something that's really fast and jittery, like kind of stuttering around a point. It really just depends on the effect that you want. At this speed, it's not that much different because I'm running it so fast, but if I were running it slower, the step has a definite, it's a little bit different of a feel because it kind of stays on one section and then moves to the next section, whereas the smooth is going to be kind of sliding around those. And so then when I go to my next, so if you look here on the math, you'll see that I have very little of that added. It's at just like maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock. But I have the voltage from the pressure points I have maxed out here because I want to get all of that and just a little bit of random to kind of jitter around that point. So then when I go to my next point, so that would be one thing that you could do with the Wogglebug and if you have a Wogglebug and a Maths. And then if you also, another thing that I think is kind of fun is you could add something to that patch that is maybe more predictable. So a really slow rising function. So you're gonna go to that point that you selected with pressure points, and then you're gonna start going from that point forward in a very chronological way. But then don't forget there's also that random voltage that's maybe pulling you back. So I'm going to subtract that random voltage that I have here. I'm going to subtract that. So I'm going to set it counterclockwise a little bit. And then add this in. And then I don't know if you have any echoes at hand. It doesn't have to be in your modular, but anywhere, just about anywhere. If you take that sound and you patch it through an echo, you get this really great effect of kind of smearing all those sounds. So they start layering on top of each other. There's also something you can do with the Morphogene itself, and that is turn up morph. And so now you have more than one playing at a time. So you're scanning through multiple genes. So take that, apply some echo, and you'll hear that layering start. And with the Echophones, kind of one of my default patches with the Echophone is to have depth at 50%, and then have pitch just a little bit one way or the other, just so that the repeats are all detuned from each other, and it kind of means that if you have really high feedback settings, you don't get the oscillations quite as much. Oh yeah, we got to wrap it up. Is there any other quick questions? Sorry, if I shouldn't have babbled for a half hour before I had taken your questions. Can I get one more question in?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Yeah, real quick. Just how easy it is to zone in on the part of the sound?
Zone in, like to go to a certain piece?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends on. So there's two factors in that. One is gene size, and the other is slide. And so, for example, in this particular sound, well, morph would make a difference too. You probably want to turn morph down, so you're at 1. When you have larger splices, you're kind of limited. Your resolution is limited to how large your splice is. But as you turn it up, you have finer resolution. So you could find just the very beginning. The very beginning of a sound. But like I said, if I had splice turned down, or gene size turned down, I don't Yeah, if you're trying to scrub sound, then turning gene size up is going to be best for that. And in fact, it kind of automatically does that. If I'm just playing a sound back with gene size full counterclockwise, as soon as it senses the slide moving, it actually goes down to a smaller gene size so you can. Yeah, it's scrubbing essentially. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, right. And then when you stop, it just starts playing from there. Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks, folks, for coming out. And I hope that if any of you all have time to get up to the Museum of Arts and Design to see Rob's exhibition, I hope you will. It's super fun if you're into synthesizers, and I assume you are because you're still here, and that's all I've talked about for the last hour or so. It's up in, was it Columbus Boulevard? So I'm sure it's an area that all of you go to every day. But it's definitely worth the short trip up there to check it out. It's a really cool exhibit.
And I think for folks who maybe asked or answered a question, I think we might have a T-shirt.
Oh, right, yeah.
So if you all want to stick around, and if you don't have your size, we will mail you when we get back to Nashville next week. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for coming all the way from Nashville. So.
Stickers and 1-inch buttons around the room.
Oh yeah, stickers up here and
these cool old school NAS buttons.
What was that chord? Oh, and so the music that has been playing was all the stuff on the Make Noise label. So, everyone who's interested.